The night of April 26th, 1717. Off the coast of Cape Cod, a ship is dying. The wind is screaming at 70 miles an hour. Waves 30 feet high are breaking over the deck. Below, in the hold, more than 4.5 tons of gold and silver shift, with each impact. The weight of a plundered empire, grinding against wooden beams. Men are in the water. The mainmast is about to snap. In less than 15 minutes, the Whydah Gally will be torn apart on a sandbar, 500 feet from shore, and nearly all of the 146 souls aboard will be lost, including her captain, a 28-year-old Englishman with 4 pistols in his sash and jet black hair tied back with a ribbon. One of the wealthiest pirates of his age. His name was Samuel Bellamy. They called him Black Sam, and for more than 260 years, nobody could find his ship, until one man did, a Cape Cod native who had been searching since he was a boy. What he found changed history, because the Whydah Gally is the only pirate shipwreck ever fully authenticated, the only one. More than 200,000 artifacts have been pulled from the sand. Gold coins, cannons, pistols, even the leg bone of a boy of about 10 who begged to join the crew. This is the story of Black Sam Bellamy and the Whydah. Samuel Bellamy was born in 1689 in the parish of Hiddesley, Devon, England, the youngest of 6 children. He went to sea as a boy and joined the Royal Navy in his late teens, saw battle, learned the rigging and the guns, and the way a ship answers to a strong hand on the wheel. Then the wars ended, and the Navy downsized, and Bellamy found himself in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, around 1715. Looking for work, looking for something, he found a woman. Her name was Goody Hallett. Legend would come to call her Maria. Her family liked Bellamy well enough, the story goes, but they did not think a penniless sailor was husband material for their daughter. So Bellamy made a decision. He would find his fortune and come back for her. In early 1716, he partnered with a wealthy young man named Palsgrave Williams, whose father was the Attorney General of Rhode Island. Together, they sailed south to Florida. A hurricane the previous summer had destroyed the Spanish treasure fleet, scattering gold and silver across the seafloor. They would salvage what they could. They found almost nothing. So they made another decision. If they could not take treasure from the sea, they would take it from the ships that still sailed. They turned pirate, joining the crew of Captain Benjamin Hornigold. Hornigold's second in command was a towering, terrifying man named Edward Teach. The world would soon know him as Blackbeard. Bellamy was good at this, charismatic, strategic, fair. When Hornigold refused to attack English ships, the crew voted him out. In his place, they elected Bellamy. Within months, Bellamy was commanding a fleet of his own. Over the course of just over 1 year, he and his men captured at least 53 ships. He divided the plunder equally among his crew. He dressed like a prince in black velvet coats and silk stockings, 4 dueling pistols, always in his sash. He refused to powder his hair, tying it back with a ribbon instead. They called him Black Sam. Forbes magazine has ranked him among the highest-earning pirates in history, his fortune estimated at around $140 million in today's money. And in the spring of 1717, he captured the ship that would make him a legend. The Whydah Gally was built in London in 1715. She was not a pirate ship. She was a slave ship, commissioned by Sir Humphrey Maurice, a member of Parliament and a leading slave merchant in London, just over 100 feet long, 300 tons, 3 masts, 18 cannons, fast enough to outrun nearly anything on the water at 13 knots. She was named for the slave port of Whydah, in what is now Benin, West Africa. Her maiden voyage followed the triangle trade, England to West Africa, with arms, textiles, and wine. There, traders loaded an estimated 367 human beings into her hold. Men, women, children, kidnapped and sold. 312 survived the Middle Passage to Jamaica, where they were sold into plantation slavery. The Whydah then took on a cargo of gold, ivory, indigo, sugar, and rum for the return to England. She never made it. In late February 1717, in the Windward Passage between Cuba and Hispaniola, Bellamy spotted her. He gave chase. For 3 days, the Whydah ran. For 3 days, Bellamy followed. When he finally pulled within range and fired a single shot, Captain Lawrence Prince lowered his flag. Bellamy was so impressed by the ship and her peaceful surrender that he gave Prince his own vessel, the Sultana, and 20 pounds in gold and silver as a gesture of respect. Then he turned the Whydah into a pirate flagship. He upgraded her to 28 guns. He cleared the slave barricades from the deck. He loaded her with the accumulated treasure of 53 captured vessels, gold coins, silver bars, pieces of 8, jewelry, ivory, more than 4.5 tons of precious cargo. And then he set a course north, toward Cape Cod, toward the woman he had promised to return to. He never reached her. The evening of April 26th, 1717. Bellamy's fleet was scattered across the waters off Cape Cod. The Marianne had peeled off toward Rhode Island, so Williams could visit family. The other ships had lost sight of the flagship in dense fog. The Whydah was alone. That afternoon, Bellamy had captured a small sloop, the Mary Ann, carrying Madeira wine. He took her captain and some of her crew aboard as prisoners. That captain knew these waters. Bellamy asked him to help pilot the Whydah through the Cape. He refused. Around sunset, the wind died. A massive fog bank swallowed the horizon. Then the nor'easter hit. 70-mile-per-hour winds, waves building to 30 and 40 feet. The Whydah was driven toward the shoals. At midnight, she struck a sandbar off what is now Wellfleet, Massachusetts. Bow first, in 16 feet of water. The mainmast snapped. The ship was dragged into 30 feet of water and capsized. More than 60 cannons tore through the overturned decks, shredding the hull. Bodies and treasure scattered across 4 miles of coastline. Of the 146 men aboard, only 2 survived the wreck. Thomas Davis, a Welsh carpenter, and 1 other. 7 more survived from the Mary Ann. 9 men in total were arrested and tried for piracy in Boston. 6 were hanged. King George's pardon for all pirates arrived in Boston 3 weeks too late. 2 were freed after the court believed they had been forced into piracy. The last, a 16-year-old Mosquito Indian named John Julian, was sold into slavery to John Quincy, the great-grandfather of President John Quincy Adams. More than 100 bodies washed ashore. The coroner buried them. Then came the moon cussers, the wreckers of Cape Cod, who cursed the moon so they could loot by darkness. They stripped the bodies and the beach. Governor Samuel Shute sent Captain Cyprian Southack to secure what remained. Southack arrived too late for the gold, but he made a map, and on that map, next to a mark at the wreck site, he wrote that the riches with the guns would be buried in the sand. That map sat in archives for more than 260 years. Barry Clifford grew up on Cape Cod in the 1950s. He spent his childhood scouring the beaches for doubloons. He heard the stories. The Whydah was out there, somewhere, under the sand. Nobody had ever found it. Cape Cod's waters are unforgiving. Shifting currents, brutal tides, visibility near zero. Clifford grew up, went to college, got a degree in history and sociology. But he never forgot the Whydah. He spent hundreds of hours in libraries, reading every account of the wreck he could find. That was where he found Southhack's map, the note about the riches buried in the sand. In 1984, Clifford sailed out to the area Southhack had mapped 2.5 centuries earlier. He used a magnetometer, scanning the seafloor for metal, and there it was, 14 feet below the surface, under 5 feet of sand, the remains of the Whydah Gally. In 1985, his team pulled up a heavy object caked in concretions. When they cleaned it, they found an inscription. The Whydah Gally, 1716. It was the ship's bell. Proof. This was the first and remains the only fully authenticated Golden Age pirate shipwreck ever discovered. Over the decades that followed, Clifford and his team recovered more than 200,000 artifacts, gold bars, silver coins, pieces of 8, cannons weighing up to 1,500 pounds, flintlock pistols still loaded with shot and wadding, the ship's iron stove, a pewter plate scratched deep from the knives of men cutting salt meat, and the most haunting find of all, a shoe, a stocking, and inside them a human leg bone, the remains of a boy of about 10 who had been traveling with his mother on a ship Bellamy captured. The boy had begged to join the pirate crew. Bellamy let him. He died in the wreck. His bone, shoe, and stocking fused together by 3 centuries under the sea. Clifford opened the Whydah Pirate Museum in West Yarmouth, Massachusetts in 2016. He and his team still return to the site every summer. The wreck has not given up everything. It may never give up everything. Here is what the Whydah teaches us. History hides what it cannot protect. A slave merchant could not protect his flagship. A pirate prince with 53 captured ships to his name could not protect himself from a nor'easter on a spring night off Cape Cod. For more than 260 years, the Atlantic held the Whydah in its grip. Sailors, historians, treasure hunters, all of them walked the beaches of Wellfleet and looked out at the water and wondered. Only one man turned wondering into searching. Barry Clifford was not the richest, not the best equipped, not the first to try. He was the one who read the old maps, who sat in libraries while others dreamed, who understood that the difference between a lost legend and a found fortune is always one person who paid the right kind of attention at the right moment. The Whydah is not the end of this story. It is the proof. Proof that what history buries, the sea does not destroy. It preserves. Behind glass in a museum on Cape Cod, you can see a boy's shoe, still laced, still whole, 3 centuries after he walked onto a pirate ship and into legend. You can touch pieces of 8 that Bellamy himself may have counted, the only authenticated pirate treasure anywhere on Earth, and somewhere out there, under the sand and the shifting currents, more is still waiting. What do you think is still buried beneath the sands off Cape Cod? Subscribe to Lost Fathoms. Real stories, real history, real treasure. The Whydah proved that the legends are not just stories, but it took one man with an old map and a magnetometer to prove it. See you in the next one.